Now we're going to pivot this discussion away from the ASA and talk more in depth about Cisco's firepower deployment and design methodology. Firepower is Cisco's IPS solution, and it does a great job with handling this esteemed mantle. It can be deployed either as an IPS or IDS, which is really cool. Another option, which we'll cover later in a minute, is Firepower Threat Defense, or FTD. The firepower appliance, or module, whichever is being used, is typically deployed in line to the traffic so that it can process information needed to perform its role functions. Firepower as an IDS or IPS provides analytics and automated defense against threats. It allows for URL filtering, malware protection, network profiling, and identity-based policies and control. Application Visibility and Control, or AVC, is another feature that this device has, giving us the capability to classify applications and put them under a policy for defensive posturing. So let's start out with this particular discussion by talking about the Firepower module as an add-on to the ASA. This is a Firepower code, not the FTD code specifically. What this deployment model does for us is it allows us to run a typical ASA code on our hardware, but then add on a module specific to Firepower so that we get the IDS and IPS functionality as well. This code is Cisco's Next Generation IPS code, or NG-IPS. It's commonly called ASA Firepower Services and is implemented in quite a few environments. Having these two products integrated together helps to save on costs while still allowing the customers to be able to have the next-gen solutions. The decision of which to use and the placement of IDS or IPS devices throughout your network should be carefully considered, and I highly recommend using the CVDs to ensure that you're making the most out of them as you implement them in your environment. Firepower can also run on its own appliance and act just as an IPS or IDS instead of having to be tied to an ASA. This is where the Next Generation IPS name comes into play. As we were talking about the safe architecture and the many areas that you need to design and secure differently, the topic about defense in depth came up. This deployment mode for Firepower gives us an easier way to place sensors throughout our network, either as an IPS or an IDS. This gives us the ability to have multiple sensors in the network at some of those critical areas instead of just relying on them at the border. The base Firepower system is all about this functionality and can be managed in one of two ways, which I'll be covering later in this clip. FTD is another option when choosing your Firepower deployment, and this code helps to consolidate equipment as well. FTD gives us many ASA features in the same box as the Firepower IPS features. This code is Cisco's Next Generation Firewall solution and provides services not only relating to the IPS functionality, like deep packet inspection and malware protection, but also provides firewall services and VPN termination, as well as other ASA or firewall appliance-related features. I have to note that not all features from the ASA have been migrated over to the FTD appliance yet, so it's best to evaluate which features you need so that you can make an accurate decision into which device is best for your environment. Now that we know about the devices, let's talk about managing them. There are two different products to allow you to manage the Firepower devices, which are the Firepower Device Manager and Firepower Management Console. FDM is an onboard management system that comes with FTD appliances and is really meant for smaller, less complex implementations. It doesn't give you much on the analytics side and has more restricted configuration options than the FMC, so it's not used quite as often as its sibling, the FMC. The FMC gives us the ability to manage several Firepower appliances at once, including Firepower Threat Defense appliances, Firepower sensors, and Firepower services on the ASA. And the FMC gives us a lot of the additional features and capabilities, such as analytics, security intelligence, and good correlation tools for the threats. Let's talk about high availability real quick as well, since this is an important aspect to consider when designing and deploying your Firepower devices. Both the Firepower or FTD code and the FMC are able to support high availability in your environment. This is in the form of an active standby setup, so you can manually or automatically promote the standby to active should the primary fail. Another cool feature is that you can deploy FTD devices in a cluster similar to that in which we discussed in the ASA section. This gives us that scalability along with HA that we'd want in our organization. It also has the ability to do multi-tenancy or multi-context mode like the ASA code could. So we have the option to have several different Firepower, ASA, or both in our networks in an HA and scalable way, and we know that we need to refer to the CVDs for their best practices and design considerations. What else do we need to consider when thinking about these types of solutions? Well, it's all about the integrations. Let's talk more about that in the next clip.